Mazin Al-Eshaiker joins us now. He's an independent Iraqi politician. He's also chairman of the economic think tank India Development Center. He joins us from Baghdad. Mazin, thanks so much for joining us. The Prime Minister has submitted his resignation to Parliament. What's next for the country politically?
Absolutely. Well, thanks for the invite. Yes, he did state that he is ready to submit his resignation to Parliament, although the Constitution states that as soon as the Prime Minister submits his resignation, he no longer is the Prime Minister, and the President, who is the head of state, will assume his responsibilities for the next 15 days until Parliament chooses a replacement for the Prime Minister.
Could the Prime Minister's offer to resign lead to even more instability in the country? Who will take over?
Well, the demonstrations have been going on in about 9 provinces from Baghdad to Basra, and they've announced today that they're not going home. They'll continue their sit-in in their locations until the entire political class is eliminated. Of course, that's a very high ceiling they have put, but of course everybody's waiting to see who Parliament will pick as the next Prime Minister. Of course, the political parties who are currently in power, most of them are corrupt, obviously, are trying to bring their men into power to replace Adil Abdul-Mahdi. The demonstrators and the political bloc Sairun, which is headed by His Eminence Sayyid Muqtada Sadr, have made it very clear. They will refuse any candidate who is political, who belongs to a political party. They will only allow an independent, ethical, and what they call a technocrat who is not affiliated with any of the political parties to replace Adil Abdul-Mahdi in some sort of an interim government, a transitional government, or let's call it a salvation government for a year and a half in order to rewrite the Constitution, to do the national census, and to draw the districts for the elections, so it's multi-district elections, and rewrite the election law, as well as pick independent judges to be in the Electoral Commission, so that this interim government Prime Minister will actually set up the election, and truly representative Parliament will be elected, who in effect will pick the next Prime Minister in about a year and a half or 2 years.
Right. The protesters have listed a number of grievances. You mentioned corruption. They also are concerned about what they say is failing public services and foreign interference in the internal affairs of Iraq. That's a reference to Iran. Could you give us a sense of how serious these problems are?
Well, the most conservative estimate is that $300 billion have been siphoned off the budget since 2003. Iraq has gotten maybe around $1,000 billion or $1 trillion over the last 16 years. About 1/3 of it have been stolen by the corrupt politicians. So this is actually very, very high, and that's a conservative estimate. Some think it's even higher than that. As far as the lack of services, Iraq has spent $24 billion on the infrastructure for the electricity, and still homes and offices get about 6 or 7 hours of electricity and cut off the rest of the time. As far as foreign interference, it's, of course, Iran is the number one country that's being accused, but that doesn't mean that Turkey, Saudi Arabia, even Syria and Kuwait and the United States have interfered inside Iraq. But what the common Iraqi, the man on the street, so to speak, can see that drugs are coming in from Iran. Even the corrupt politicians, for some reason, are mostly affiliated or do support the Iranian government. So I think there's a heavier weight on Iran than the rest of the countries when it comes to foreign interference in the internal affairs of the Iraqi government.
Is there any concern in Iraq that this kind of instability that we've seen, political instability as well as the security situation, could lead to the re-emergence of radical groups like ISIS?
Of course not. I mean, the grievance right now is from the common people, mostly the educated, the liberals, the seculars, as well as the very, very poor, the ones who are under the poverty line. So there's some sort of coalition between all these groups that realize that this country can no longer continue to operate with the same politicians, the same political parties, the same corruption. They want entire change. Of course, for Adil Abdul-Mahdi, he's not the main person to blame for all the the ills in the last 16 years, but he's on top of this pyramid. So as a prime minister, he heads all these different groups, all these ministers who are very corrupt. The current ministries are very, very corrupt, even more corrupt than Nouri Maliki, which was obviously one of the most corrupt eras in Iraq's history. So yes, he does not he's not personally responsible, but he didn't do anything to reverse the trend into corruption. So people thought that he's there to change everything and to fight corruption, but actually the government became a lot worse. Of course, for a person almost 80 years old to end his political life with this big massacre that took place yesterday in Nasiriyah, where the armed forces went there and saw thousands of young kids, 16, 17, 18-year-old civilians, demonstrating peacefully, and they were shot with live bullets. They killed over 47 young kids yesterday in a huge massacre. Then these armed forces went over to the city of Najaf and did the same thing. So these huge massacres is a very sad ending for a long political career of Abdul-Mahdi.
Mazin Al-Eshaiker, thanks so much for joining us, sir.